My name is Eleanor Walker. I'm 42 years old, a retired general. A name they left off the guest list, but not off the record. You'd think after 17 years in uniform, silence wouldn't bother me anymore. But there's a difference between battlefield silence and the kind that follows you home. The kind that looks like crystal chandeliers, linen tablecloths, and a seat no one sets for you. The Walker estate always stood taller in my memory. Gates sharp as verdicts, columns carved like they were holding up more than just stone, legacy, expectation, weight. But weight doesn't scare me. Not anymore. I wasn't there for applause, or forgiveness, or some tearful family reunion. I was there for one reason: to make sure they knew exactly who they'd spent the last 2 decades pretending didn't exist. Some people fight for medals. Some people fight for inheritance. Me? I fight for the one thing they never learned to say out loud: the truth. Because no matter how many gates they build, no matter how many names they carve into marble, you don't get to erase a Walker. Not when her name still echoes through courtrooms and battlefields alike. Not when she's spent her entire life learning how to speak last and make sure everyone remembers. My name is Eleanor Walker, and I didn't come here to fit in. I came here to deliver the final word. The tires crunched over gravel, each rotation slowing as the estate gates loomed ahead. Walker Estate's gates always felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown. Iron bars, gleaming under the pale November sun, weren't meant to keep people like me out. They were meant to remind me I never truly belonged. I rolled down the window as the guard approached. Same sharp uniform, same discreet earpiece. "Ma'am, I'll need to see," he started. Before he finished, I held up a cream-colored envelope. The Walker family reunion seal was stamped in wax like we were still in the 1800s. His brows furrowed for a second longer than necessary. Then he stepped aside. The gates opened. Autumn leaves scattered across the driveway as I pulled up in front of the main house. It rose from the earth like it owned the land. Stone columns, perfectly trimmed hedges, everything manicured within an inch of its life. I stepped out, boots landing solid on the path. Footsteps approached. I didn't need to look up. Clayton's voice cut the quiet. "Didn't think you'd show up?" He looked older. Lines at the corner of his eyes, hair grayer at the temples. But the smirk hadn't changed. It still carried the same calculation, like he was always 2 moves ahead. I met his gaze evenly. Family event. I wouldn't miss it. His laugh was short, humorless. "Since when do you care about family?" A second pair of heels clicked across stone. "Meredith." "Eleanor," she greeted smoothly, smile cool as the wind. "You're early." Traffic wasn't as bad as I expected. I kept my tone flat. She reached out, brushing imaginary dust from my sleeve like we'd been close all along. Her diamond bracelet caught the sun. "Still driving yourself?" Meredith asked lightly. "No driver these days?" I could have answered. I didn't. I let the silence speak instead. Her hand dropped. Clayton glanced at the guardhouse, visibly impatient. "We weren't sure you'd fit in anymore," he said. "I don't need to fit." I reached into my coat pocket, pulling out the invitation again. But I was invited. Clayton's jaw flexed, a tick just beneath the cheekbone. Meredith's eyes flicked to the envelope, to me, back again. The game they thought they were playing? I wasn't here for it. One of the servants appeared in the doorway. Sylvia stood just beyond, quiet as ever, arms folded, watching. Clayton took one more step closer, lowering his voice. "General, huh? Didn't think you still mattered?" The words landed like deliberate strikes, but I'd heard sharper. I stepped back, folding the invitation slowly before slipping it into my jacket pocket. "Guess you thought wrong." There's always that one table where you don't belong. The grand hall hadn't changed. Crystal chandeliers spilled gold light across polished floors. Long tables gleamed with silver cutlery, and wine glasses lined up like soldiers. And then, there was my table, tucked in the corner, half shadowed by a curtain that someone hadn't quite pulled all the way open. 17 years old, sent away. One bag. No goodbye. That memory pressed against my ribs like an old bruise as I lowered myself into the chair. Linen napkin folded perfectly in front of me. No place card. No wine poured. Just me. The others gathered in clumps. My cousins I hadn't seen in a decade. Family friends who'd aged out of their Botox grace period. Laughter moved through the room like a tide I wasn't part of. I kept my hands on my lap, counted breaths. 1, 2, 3. Then Harrison Walker's voice broke across the hall. "Welcome, everyone. It's been too long since we gathered under one roof." I didn't look up. I didn't need to. His voice hadn't softened with age. As always, we're here to honor the Walker name, to celebrate legacy. Meredith and Clayton have both carried that forward in ways we couldn't have imagined. A round of polite applause. Nothing else. Not a single mention. No, and Eleanor. Not even a side note. I let my jaw tighten but didn't flinch. Just kept counting. Meredith peeled away from a cluster of guests, glass of white wine in hand, moving through the room like she owned not just the house but the air inside it. She stopped at the edge of my table, smile cool as the wine. "Eleanor," she said, voice low enough not to carry. "I didn't realize you'd still be here." I met her gaze, steady. I was invited. Of course. She twirled the stem of her glass between two fingers. "Though retirement must be dull for you. No meetings, no deployments. Must feel strange." I said nothing. Her smile widened. The chandelier's reflection caught in her earrings, throwing tiny sparks across the tablecloth. "Still," she added, voice silk-wrapped steel, "I suppose even a general needs somewhere to sit." Before I could answer, a quiet presence slid into the chair beside me. Sylvia. She didn't say anything, just folded her napkin, eyes on the table rather than on either of us. Meredith's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "Enjoy the evening," she murmured, setting her wine glass down deliberately in front of me. "You were always good at blending in, even now." My fingers brushed the base of the glass, cold, condensation beating against my skin. I let the silence stretch one beat longer than comfortable. Sylvia didn't look up, but I knew she was listening. Not tonight. Some legacies aren't lost, just locked away. The hallways of Walker Estate whispered with drafts long after the guests had gone quiet. I moved alone, my boots soft against the marble as I let instinct guide my steps. Past the grand piano no one ever played. Past portraits hung so perfectly aligned, they looked machine-placed. Grandfather's portrait hung over the landing. Same sharp eyes as mine. Same weight in the jawline, like the world rested somewhere between thought and decision. I paused there, my gaze meeting his in the dark. What would he have said, seeing me like this? I kept moving. The library sat at the end of the hall, doors taller than most people's living rooms. Dark wood, brass handles. My hand wrapped around one, pulling gently. Locked. Not surprising. I stared at the keyhole a moment longer than necessary, weighing options I wasn't quite ready to use. "Locked?" The voice came soft, from behind my left shoulder. "Sylvia." I didn't turn right away. Just let the quiet settle between us like dust. "Apparently so," I said finally. Her keys jingled lightly. Not many, just 2 or 3. She stepped forward without a word, slipped one into the lock, and turned it. The door opened on a soft click. Inside, The library smelled the same as it always had: old paper, cedar oil, and faint candle wax. Rows upon rows of books, shelves stretching from floor to ceiling. The heavy velvet curtains were half drawn, moonlight painting sharp angles across wood and leather. Sylvia didn't step inside. I did. My boots left faint impressions in the dust near the window seat. It hadn't been used in a while, probably not since Walter Walker died. I moved along the shelves, fingers trailing, half watching my own shadow ripple along spines and ledges. "Why now?" I asked without looking back. Sylvia stayed by the door. Her voice reached me like a hand across distance. "Because you're not the one hiding anymore." I stopped at the far wall. A cabinet I didn't remember. Darker wood than the rest. Out of place. I knelt, hand brushing its edge. It wasn't nailed down. With a firm push, it slid 2 inches to the left, revealing a square outline in the wall. A safe. The metal gleamed faintly under dust, old enough to predate digital codes. Still functional. I stood slowly, turning to face Sylvia fully. Meredith and Clayton. My voice barely a breath. They hid something. Sylvia didn't answer right away. Then, the will. The room felt colder suddenly, like the walls pulled tighter. "They said you didn't deserve it," she added, her voice quieter still. "Said rank wasn't family." The words didn't hit like they might have years ago. I'd carried worse on my back, on my shoulders, in files marked classified. I ran my thumb along the edge of the safe, pulse steady as stone. "That's about to change. ChatGPT Janoi, you can dress up a lie in silk." But it's still a lie. The garden stretched out in all directions, green so perfectly trimmed it might as well have been printed on glossy paper. Linen-draped tables circled a central platform where a microphone and speakers had been set up. Champagne flutes glimmered in guests' hands. Laughter moved like practiced choreography. And above it all, the Walker estate stood behind us, watching like a silent judge. At 16, they called it "For Your Own Good." Military school. One bag. No goodbye. I'd learned how to keep my face still from moments like that. Now wasn't much different. I stood just off to the side, near a table set with untouched hors d'oeuvres. A waiter passed with a tray. I didn't take anything. My hands remained folded in front of me, fingers tucked tight, knuckles white against navy fabric. Meredith stepped up to the microphone, her voice clear, elegant. "Thank you all for coming to the Walker family autumn gathering," she began, smiling as if the cameras loved her. "It's always meant a great deal to my father and to me to keep our family's legacy alive." The crowd shifted closer. Polite murmurs rippled like slow-moving water. "And as we look toward the future," Meredith continued, "it's with pride that I share the continuation of that legacy, through the Walker estate itself, which will officially pass into my care." A round of applause rose on cue. Clayton stood nearby, hands folded behind his back like a security detail. He wasn't smiling, but the approval in his posture said everything. My name wasn't mentioned. I felt it like static under my skin, but I didn't move. Meredith's gaze swept the guests, lingering only a second too long on my corner, like a cat acknowledging the mouse she wouldn't bother chasing. "Inheritance is more than property," she added. "It's trust, family, continuity." The words weren't for me. They never had been. I barely heard the next part. My mind slid sideways, unbidden, into memory. Gray skies, rain flickering against an airport window. Me, 16, standing with one duffel bag slung over my shoulder, boarding school papers in hand. No goodbye, I'd thought then. Except there had been one. Sylvia, standing near the gate, umbrella clutched too tightly, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She hadn't spoken, just watched. The flash of memory broke as real applause swelled again. Clayton stepped up beside Meredith now, taking the microphone. "My sister," he said, voice heavier, less polished than hers, "always had a talent for leading, even back when we were kids. I'm proud to stand with her today." My chest didn't tighten. It didn't have to. Years of controlled breathing made sure of that. But inside, something twisted slow and deliberate. Eleanor Walker, invisible again. I let my gaze drift across the lawn. Families grouped together. Children in little jackets. Faces already learning which smiles to wear. Harrison Walker stood in the back, flanked by two old friends. His face carved from stone. When Meredith finally set the microphone aside, she moved toward me. People stepped away as she passed. Deference, habit, both. "Eleanor?" she greeted, voice dipped in mock silk. "I hope you're enjoying yourself." I didn't answer. "You know," Meredith said, sipping from a glass of white wine, "you never belonged here, Eleanor." I looked at her fully now, letting silence do the heavy work. Around us, the party continued. Laughter didn't quite reach the edges where we stood. But beyond that, very faint, there was something else. A distant sound. Helicopter blades, still far off. Subtle. Not yet noticed. Silence cut sharper than any blade. The last of the champagne flutes were nearly empty. The sun had slid lower behind the Walker estate, turning the sky a bruised gold. And I was still standing where I'd been all afternoon. Off to the side, near the edge of the main lawn, where no one quite looked at me but everyone knew I was there. My name was missing from the guest list, but not from the records. Clayton was talking now, microphone in hand. His voice rolled out like smoke, pleasant enough if you didn't listen too hard. "And so we continue the Walker tradition," he said, smiling toward Harrison, toward Meredith, as if there weren't a third sibling on the property at all. Strong leadership, a steady hand. The crowd clapped on cue. Crisp, practiced. Then came the sound. At first it blended with the wind, low, rhythmic, like the earth itself had decided to pulse. I turned my head slowly. The sky darkened slightly as the helicopter appeared over the tree line. Military grade, matte black paint, no civilian logo. The crowd's reaction was immediate. First confusion, heads tilting, conversations halting. Then alarm, people stepping back as napkins fluttered off tables and wine glasses tipped from gusts of displaced air. Clayton's voice faltered. Meredith looked up, shielding her eyes against the downdraft. The helicopter hovered once, then descended onto the lawn itself, rotor wash flattening grass and leaves. Chairs tipped over. Silverware clattered to the ground. No one spoke. The side door opened with a mechanical hiss. Two figures stepped out, one in full dress uniform, boots polished like mirrors. The officer scanned the crowd, eyes settling on me almost instantly. His voice cut through everything. "General Walker, you're needed." Not Eleanor. Not Miss Walker. General. My pulse didn't jump. My breath didn't stutter. I stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, across the grass, past Sylvia, who stood now near the edge of the platform, an envelope clutched in her hand, wax seal bright against white paper. She didn't speak, just held it up where everyone could see. A copy of the will. Meredith's face had gone pale. Clayton's mouth opened, closed again. I stopped just short of the helicopter, letting the scene hold for a moment longer. Every face frozen, every glass still. Then I turned back toward them. Family doesn't make you a Walker. Legacy does. The rotors kicked up again, drowning whatever anyone might have said in return. I stepped inside, the door sealed, and as the helicopter rose, blade noise cutting the sky, my silhouette disappeared into the clouds. Some battles start without a single shot fired. The office didn't look like much from the street. Brick facade, no gold-lettered sign, just a single frosted window with Whitman and Associates etched across it. Downtown Richmond still held on to buildings like this, quiet, solid, the kind of place where real things got decided. The helicopter wasn't just proud, it was proven. I pushed the door open, bell chiming once. Inside smelled like old coffee and older paper. Jared Whitman looked up from behind his desk, sleeves rolled, tie loosened but not undone. "Eleanor," he said. No question, no hesitation. I set the envelope on his desk. He opened it carefully. No rush. Thumbed through the pages inside. My copy of the original will, the one Sylvia had handed me 2 nights ago. The room felt still around us, like the air had weight. "This is solid," Jared said quietly. "Better than solid." I sat across from him, boots leaving faint scuffs on the hardwood. The only sound was the ticking of an old wall clock. "What about the other documents?" I asked. Jared tapped a file already open next to him. "I ran checks this morning. Estate records filed with the county clerk show signatures dated 2 weeks after Walter Walker's death." 2 weeks. Exactly. That wasn't just suspicious. That was deliberate. Jared leaned back, eyes sharp beneath years of practiced calm. "We're looking at forgery." A faint buzz interrupted us. His phone vibrated on the desk. Unknown caller. Jared glanced at me, then picked up. "Whitman." The voice on the other end wasn't loud enough for me to catch immediately, but Jared's jaw flexed, his free hand pressed flat against the desk. "Clayton," he said finally. That got my attention. "I'm in the middle of a meeting," Jared continued evenly. "If this is about Eleanor." The voice on the other end spoke again, slower this time. I couldn't hear the words exactly, but the tone was there. Smooth, threat dressed up in velvet. Jared didn't blink. "You're wasting your client's time," Clayton said finally, clear enough now for me to catch it. There was no anger in Jared's expression, just something quieter, flatter. "We don't waste time," Jared said, voice cutting clean through the room. "We make records." He hung up without waiting for a response. The silence afterward felt heavier than it should have. "Problem?" I asked. "Not yet," Jared said. "But soon." I stood, turning toward the window. Richmond's skyline wasn't much, but today it looked sharp, real. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Notifications stacked along the top bar. Too many. Too fast. News alerts. Mentions. My name was trending. I watched the screen as my own photo came up. General Walker files inheritance claim against Walker Estate. They thought I'd walk away again. This time, I wasn't the one leaving. The last of my things fit into one bag. Not because there wasn't more to take, but because I didn't need more. Just one worn duffel slung over my shoulder, boots steady on the polished wood floors as I made my way through the house one last time. The sun bled gold across the hallway windows. Long shadows stretched out in front of me, each step pulling me closer to the front door. The last time I left this house, I didn't look back. I didn't plan to look back now either. When I reached the driveway, the sky was painted that specific kind of Virginia orange. Quiet, deliberate, like it was holding its breath. I stepped down the front stairs without pausing. Gravel shifted beneath my boots, and my reflection caught in the polished chrome of one of Clayton's parked cars. Out of place, like I always had been. A voice cut through the quiet. "Still running?" I didn't need to turn to know it was Meredith. Her heels clicked deliberately on the stone behind me. I let the bag slide off my shoulder, resting it at my feet. Then I turned just enough to see her. Meredith stood at the top of the steps, arms crossed, one eyebrow lifted like she was trying to decide if this was a victory or an inconvenience. You always did leave before things finished, she added. This time's different, I said evenly. Her mouth curved, almost a smile, almost pity. I doubt that. A second figure moved quietly behind her. Sylvia. No fanfare, no announcement. Just there. Meredith didn't notice. Her attention was all on me, waiting for a reaction I didn't have any intention of giving. Sylvia's hand brushed against my arm as she passed. Cool metal slipped into my palm. A key. Small. Unmarked. In case you come back, Sylvia murmured so quietly only I could hear. My fingers closed around it once, then let it disappear into my pocket. I met Meredith's gaze fully now, letting the weight of everything in me settle there. Years, names, titles she'd spent so long pretending didn't exist. Strays survive longer than show dogs, I said, voice level. Meredith's mouth tightened. Her arms dropped to her sides, fingers flexing once, sharp and white-knuckled. I didn't wait for whatever comeback she was holding on to. Bag over my shoulder again, boots moving steady down the driveway. I didn't look back. Not even when the sun dipped below the line of trees. Inside the house, a door clicked shut. Somewhere deeper in, shadows shifted. Later that night, under a colder kind of light, Meredith's voice murmured low over the line of a private call. Make sure the papers are burned. Some truths can't be buried, not if you know where to dig. The hallway inside the Military Records Center felt colder than I remembered. Sterile white walls, fluorescent lighting, the kind of quiet that wasn't natural. My grandfather's voice stirred in my mind again. Never trust a quiet room. I stood next to Dean Harper, a man I hadn't seen in 5 years. His uniform looked sharper than mine ever did, sleeves pressed without a single crease. Dean tapped his ID badge against the security panel. The door clicked open. You sure you want to go this route? He asked. If I wasn't sure, I said, I wouldn't be here. He didn't argue. Dean had always been that kind of soldier. Minimal words, all action. We stepped inside. Rows of metal filing cabinets stretched out in front of us. Not everything was digital. Not everything should be. This way. Dean led me down the second row, stopping halfway. He pulled open a drawer, flipped through folders until his hand settled on the one labeled Walker Estate, Private Holdings. Jared had already submitted the court orders. The military side just needed someone willing to make sure things didn't get lost between departments. Dean handed me the file. Forensic reports in there, chain of custody, signatures traced through multiple accounts. I flipped it open under the overhead light. Pages of black and white scans, highlighted sections, notary seals, my grandfather's signature, and the forgery laid against it. The differences weren't visible to most people, but I saw them. A 0.5 millimeter hesitation on the W. A break that shouldn't have existed. Your brother went federal on this, Dean said quietly. These kinds of forgeries. This isn't amateur work. I nodded once, throat tight. By late that night, I was back at Jared's office. His desk lamp cast a dim yellow glow as I sat in his chair, reviewing the documents again. My hand shook slightly as I traced my finger along the page. It wasn't the forgery that did it. It was the sheer precision, the intent. You're not just fighting for yourself now. This is legacy fraud. Dean's words echoed in my head, heavier than they had been in the records center. Across the room, Jared's phone buzzed once. He glanced at the screen, frown pulling tight. What is it? I asked. Jared's jaw tightened. Anonymous number. He opened the message anyway. One sentence stared back in stark black text. They know you're digging. They couldn't win on paper. So they switched to shadows. Jared's office lights were already off when I pulled up, the street outside washed in muted gold from a lone lamp post. It wasn't like him to leave early, Not after everything we'd filed. My gut tightened the moment I stepped through the door. The glass pane that once read Whitman and Associates lay fractured on the floor. Inside, the place had been gutted. Cabinet drawers yanked open, files strewn across the carpet, paper shredded in handfuls, like someone hadn't cared what they destroyed so long as it looked thorough. Sylvia once said, "The house always defends itself." I'd learned to listen to old sayings. But tonight, the house was paper, and paper burned easier than stone. Jared appeared from the back room, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie missing completely. His face didn't show surprise when he saw me. "They were looking for originals," he said. "What did they get?" I asked quietly. "Not enough." He knelt, scooping up a crumpled page with gloved fingers. "But more than I like." We didn't waste time talking longer. There wasn't a point. I left 15 minutes later, pulse steady as steel. The drive back to my temporary apartment wasn't long. 6 blocks, 2 red lights, but my stomach hadn't unclenched. By the time I reached my door, I didn't need confirmation. The lock hung askew. The frame bore fresh scratches. I pushed it open slowly, boots quiet against hardwood. The lights were off. No sound except the faint creak of wood settling. "Figured they'd try?" Dean's voice drifted from the dark corner by the window. I didn't flinch. He stood with one hand resting on the butt of his holstered sidearm, eyes calm beneath the brim of his cap. "How bad?" I asked. "They didn't find what they wanted," Dean said simply. "I was here first." I set my keys down on the kitchen counter. "Meredith?" Dean shrugged. "You really have to ask?" "Of course not." For a while we just stood there. The air between us felt stretched thin, like the quiet before a weather front rolled in. I looked at the broken lock again, the cracked doorframe, the scuffed floor. Then I turned back toward Dean. "Let them come," I said, voice flat. "I don't scare easily." Before Dean could answer, my phone buzzed against the counter. I picked it up without checking the screen. Jared's voice cut through the line. "We still have the backups. It's not over." This wasn't just family business anymore. It was federal. The Richmond courthouse rose against the gray November sky like something carved out of old stone and older rules. Wide steps, heavy columns, flags snapping against sharp wind. As I stood at the bottom of those steps, collar turned up against the cold, I could feel the weight of every eye on me. The estate's walls always seemed taller in winter. Today, those walls had moved to the courtroom. Inside, the air tasted like dust and paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. No velvet curtains, no crystal chandeliers, just straight-backed pews, sealed evidence folders, and the hum of low voices waiting for something real to happen. Jared stood beside me at the defendant's table. His posture was as steady as mine. Clayton and Meredith sat across the aisle. Meredith's eyes flicked toward me once before turning back to her folded hands. Clayton didn't look over at all. Judge Ramirez entered exactly on time. Black robe sharp, gray hair clipped short, face carved from granite. "Opening statements," he said, voice carrying clean through the room. Jared rose first. He didn't waste time. No preamble, no flourishes. "We are here today because my client, Eleanor Walker, possesses verifiable evidence that the will currently in probate was forged." A quiet ripple moved through the observers' benches. Jared lifted a folder, holding up a page encased in clear plastic. "Forensic analysis confirms signature discrepancies. Chain of custody records have been submitted for review." Judge Ramirez nodded once, eyes steady. Then Clayton stood. If Jared was all sharp lines, Clayton's voice came coated in honey and dust. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my sister has been estranged from this family for nearly 2 decades. Her sudden return coinciding with this claim should raise questions." He let the silence stretch. Estranged general, Clayton continued, turning toward the benches like he was speaking to a gallery instead of a judge. Chasing ghosts. I didn't blink. I didn't move. The next voice wasn't mine. It was Sylvia's. From the back of the courtroom, she stepped forward slowly. Small, quiet, but each footfall deliberate as snowfall. I was there, Sylvia said, voice carrying across marble and wood. I saw the original will. Every head turned. Jared didn't even look surprised. Neither did I. Judge Ramirez tapped his gavel once for order. I will review the evidence in full, he said firmly. Court acknowledges a disputed will. Trial set for full hearing. His voice settled like stone on water. When we stepped outside, the courthouse doors heavy behind us, the cold air felt sharper. Cameras flashed in the distance, press already waiting. Jared turned to me. It starts now. I didn't answer immediately, just watched the sky. Felt the wind slice across my face. Then I said it. Voice low enough only he could hear. Checkmate. Some battles wear suits and ties. The main hearing room inside Richmond Courthouse was twice the size of the one from our preliminary trial, but it felt smaller. The walls were all pale wood and neutral carpet, meant to look warm. They didn't. It wasn't warmth anyone in this room cared about. I wasn't 17 anymore. And this time, my name was on the record. Rows of pew benches lined the back wall. Local reporters, family friends from too far back to matter, people wearing quiet expressions like they were waiting to see a public spectacle. I could feel them looking at me from behind, but I didn't turn. Jared sat to my left. His fingers rested lightly on the surface of a stack of files labeled Walker Estate, Contested Will. Across the aisle, Clayton and Meredith flanked their own legal team. Meredith's nails tapped slowly against her phone screen until the bailiff announced, "All rise." Judge Ramirez entered. His robe wasn't as crisp as the first day, but his face hadn't lost its edge. "Be seated," he said. The trial began. Jared rose first, voice steady. "Your Honor, I present certified forensic reports analyzing the signatures in question." He opened the first folder, lifting a clear plastic sheet containing 2 overlapping scans. The projector threw them onto the wall. 2 signatures labeled side by side, Walter Walker's genuine and the alleged forgery. Per the chain of custody, Exhibit A shows hesitation marks inconsistent with Walter Walker's known signature history. Verified by 2 independent laboratories. Jared's voice didn't change tone even once. Pages 2 through 4 outline account authorizations tied directly to property transfers, fraudulently executed under this signature. I kept my eyes forward, expression calm. Across from me, Meredith shifted once. Not much, but enough. Her lawyer stood next, pushing up glasses, voice dry. "We contest the forensic analysis conclusiveness." "On what grounds?" Judge Ramirez asked. The lawyer didn't answer directly. Instead, Clayton stood. "No disrespect to the court," he said smoothly, voice louder now. "But I think it's worth remembering context. My sister Eleanor hasn't been involved with this family in over 15 years. He turned, letting the room see him. See me. "Estranged military officer returns, claiming inheritance," he added. "Doesn't that raise questions?" I didn't blink. Neither did Jared. "Eleanor Walker abandoned the Walker estate long before Walter Walker's passing," Clayton said. "Why should the court prioritize her claims now?" Jared stood again before the judge could answer. "Because claims aren't based on reputation," Jared said coolly. "They're based on fact, and the facts have been laid before this court." Judge Ramirez leaned back slightly, expression unreadable. Then Meredith's voice cut the air. "You think this is about facts?" Her tone cracked, louder than she meant to, I could tell. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering, but she shook him off. This estate was ours. We kept it alive. Silence pulsed through the courtroom like static. Judge Ramirez tapped his gavel once. Sharp. Enough to cut the moment in half. The court finds sufficient evidence of will tampering, he said firmly, voice dropping like a hammer. The trial will move to final ruling within 48 hours. Across the aisle, Clayton's jaw flexed tight. Meredith's face was pale beneath too perfect makeup. As people stood, filing out, I moved past the railing quietly, close enough to pass behind Clayton. I didn't need him to look at me. I leaned in just slightly, voice quiet, measured. It's not the rank that matters, I whispered. It's the truth. The higher they climb, the harder they fall. The courtroom wasn't as full as before. Fewer reporters, fewer bystanders. Only the ones who cared enough to see it through remained, but the air felt heavier somehow, like the weight of what was coming pressed down on every wooden bench and polished tile. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. Never be afraid to speak last. Jared stood beside me, calm as always, his hands folded neatly. Sylvia sat a row behind, her face paler than usual, but steady. Meredith and Clayton faced forward, neither one meeting my eyes. Judge Ramirez glanced down at the bench. Before we proceed to closing statements, he said, there is one more submission? Jared nodded once, crisp. Yes, Your Honor. From his briefcase, he pulled a small flash drive. No folder, no paper. Just a single black plastic case. This, Jared said, holding it up, is a recorded voice memo, dated 2 weeks before Walter Walker's passing, authenticated by 2 forensic analysts. Clayton stiffened. Meredith said nothing. Jared handed the drive to the clerk, who slotted it into the courtroom's projector system. The speakers clicked once, then filled the air with a single voice. Familiar and sharp, even years later. Walter Walker. If you're hearing this, Walter said, voice slightly strained, like he'd been sitting up in bed. It means someone's trying to contest what I've left behind. I made my decision. Eleanor is the rightful heir to the estate. That's my final word. The room didn't move. For a full beat, no one breathed. Then Sylvia stood slowly, her voice quiet but clear. I recorded that, she said. He asked me to. Meredith was pushing. She didn't want to wait. Meredith's face drained of color. Her hands, folded tight in her lap, twitched once. Order, Judge Ramirez said, though even he sounded heavier now. Continue. Jared stepped back, giving Meredith room without forcing it. But the silence pushed her harder than any words. Meredith's voice cracked first. Just a breath. Then, I just didn't want to be second. The words hung like glass breaking. I wasn't going to lose everything to a sister who barely showed up. Clayton's hand moved toward her arm, but she shook him off. For the first time since this all began, my heart tightened. Not out of pity. Just something colder, deeper. A memory of all those years when her silence cut sharper than anything she said aloud. Judge Ramirez didn't rush. He let the weight of the moment sit. Finally, he said, final ruling will be issued in 48 hours. His gavel came down once, firm, and that was it. Outside, the air felt colder than when I'd come in, but for the first time in years, it didn't press on my shoulders. It lifted. It only takes one stone to start an avalanche. By the time I pulled up to the Walker estate again, the gates were already lined with news vans. Camera lenses tracked every person who stepped past the ironwork fence, reporters clustering like birds on a wire. Microphones pressed against jackets. A voice called my name once, sharp and bright. But I didn't slow down. Dean once said, what starts in the dark always comes to light. Today, the light wasn't just figurative, it reflected off the white paper notices taped across both gates. Bold federal stamps, words printed in block letters. Property seized under court order, assets frozen pending final judgment. Dean stood just inside the driveway, arms crossed. His uniform wasn't military anymore, but the posture hadn't changed. He didn't say anything until I reached him. "Figured you'd want to see it yourself?" he said. I nodded once, eyes skimming over the house beyond. It didn't look different. Still perfect stone and perfect hedges, still too polished for its own good. But today, there were moving trucks lined up against the circular drive, engines low and steady as they idled. Meredith's voice drifted through the air before I saw her. Sharp, impatient. Inside the front doorway, she was directing two movers in pressed black shirts, arms flailing once as they maneuvered a box too slowly for her liking. Her hair wasn't set in place anymore. She wasn't wearing diamonds today. I stood where I was, watching as she disappeared again inside. Then Clayton stepped out. No suit, no tie. Just jeans, a jacket zipped halfway up, and a single duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The same kind soldiers carried through airports. For one long moment, he didn't see me. When he did, he didn't stop walking. Our eyes met as he passed. No words, no reaction. Just one last weight shifting between us, then gone. Dean shifted his stance beside me. "They won't be back," he said simply. I said nothing. My fingers curled once against my palm, then let go. The camera crews didn't push past the gates. Not yet. But their lenses caught everything. The locked doors, the moving vans, the slow fall of leaves across the lawn. After another minute, Dean tilted his head toward me. "You sure you want to keep the house, General?" ChatGPT John Noy. Some legacies aren't built with stone, but with names remembered. The house felt bigger now that it was quiet. No servants moving through the halls, no clipped voices drifting from room to room. Just the sound of my own boots against polished floors, slow and deliberate as I walked one last round. That last day at military school. Sylvia at the gate. I hadn't understood then why she stayed silent, why she didn't say goodbye. Now I did. Some things didn't need to be said out loud. In the main study, the desk was cleared except for two sets of papers waiting for my signature. One for final estate transfers, the other for the Walker Veterans Foundation. Jared had handled most of the paperwork already. All that was left now was the formal signature. I picked up the pen without hesitation. By the time I stepped outside, a handful of local reporters were already gathered. No national spotlight, no scandal. Just a quiet press conference. Exactly the way I'd asked for it. Dean stood off to the side, arms crossed. Sylvia beside him, hands folded gently. I stepped up to the small podium set in front of the estate gates. No microphones, no prepared speech. I kept it simple. "This house doesn't belong to me," I said. "It belongs to everyone who helped build it. Starting today, it's going to help veterans and families who stood where I once stood." The cameras flashed once, then twice. No shouting, no questions. Afterward, there was coffee set out on the front steps. A small group gathered, handshakes exchanged. I didn't linger long. Later that afternoon, I found Sylvia in the hallway by the portrait of Walter Walker. Her fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the frame. "I didn't know if you'd come back," she said quietly. Neither did I. We stood there together, both of us looking up at the man who'd started all of this, his eyes still sharp, still watching. "I kept my promise," I said under my breath. "Not for anyone else, just for him." Sylvia's hand rested briefly on my arm before she stepped away. No long goodbye, just peace. Out on the front lawn, Dean was waiting. In his hand, a single envelope marked with new orders. Not military this time. Private, quiet. Something less official but just as sharp. He held it out without a word. I took it, weighing the paper against my palm. Dean's mouth tilted into something close to a smile. Ready for one more ride? When I stepped off that helicopter for the last time, there wasn't a single camera waiting. No applause. No reporters hounding me with questions about legacy or rank. And that was exactly how I wanted it. For so many years, I thought coming home meant standing on those stone steps again, walking through the grand halls of the Walker estate like I belonged. I thought justice meant seeing my name engraved where others had erased it. But standing on that helipad, with nothing left to prove, and no one left to chase, I understood something simpler. It was never about the house. It wasn't about the money, or the property, or even the last will tucked away in a vault. It was about the truth. The truth that had followed me like a silent second shadow through every deployment, every courtroom bench, every family gathering where my name wasn't spoken aloud. There's a weight that comes with carrying other people's silence, a slow kind of erosion, and it doesn't show up in one big moment. It shows up in the little things, in being left off an invitation list, in walking into a room where everyone pretends not to notice you, in family dinners where there's always one empty chair no one sets a place for. That kind of quiet can swallow a person whole, but not this time, not me. I carried my name back across those gates on my own terms, signed my own papers, spoke my own words in a courtroom where once I would have been told to sit in the back and keep still. And maybe that's all legacy really is. Not some grand house with marble floors, but walking away, head up, when the last stone has been laid, and knowing you put it there yourself. I think about Meredith sometimes, not with anger, just with clarity. I remember her voice cracking in front of Judge Ramirez, the way her control slipped one hairline fracture at a time until all that polish she wore like armor collapsed under its own weight. And Clayton, carrying nothing but a single bag through the front gates. That was never going to be my ending. Because I wasn't the one who walked away this time. They were. And me? I left knowing I didn't have to look back. Like my grandfather always said, never be afraid to speak last. I kept my promise to him, and to myself. Because when all the walls come down and all the lights go out, what stays isn't the gold lettering on a gate or a name carved into stone. It's the truth. That's what outlives us. And maybe, in the end, that's the only legacy worth fighting for. Justice may not arrive on time. It may take years, even decades, quietly waiting beneath layers of silence and shadows. But when it finally speaks, its voice is unmistakable, calm, firm, undeniable. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. And perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. And maybe that's all legacy really is. Not marble columns, not grand estates, but walking away with your name intact and your truth spoken. For years, Eleanor Walker's name was left off invitations, court documents, even family memories. But in the end, she wasn't the one left standing outside the gates. They were. Because some legacies aren't built with money or property. They're built with quiet, steady choices, with the strength to stand up, even if you have to stand alone, with the patience to speak last, and speak true. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt erased or overlooked in your own life, remember, your worth isn't measured by the rooms you're invited into. It's measured by the weight of your own name when you say it out loud. Thank you for watching, for listening until the very last word. Your time, your attention, means more than you know. If Eleanor's story gave you even a moment of reflection or strength, I invite you to support this channel by liking, subscribing, or sharing with someone who might need to hear it too. Because here, we tell the stories that don't always make the guest list, but deserve to be remembered. Until next time, stand steady, Speak last, and never let silence decide your story.